Okay, turn 2 is almost the reverse of turn 1 in that white is dealt a pretty poor hand and red is dealt a stronger hand. Reflecting the balance of the different decks, it's nice to have these different decks in the game. As a result, white invests pretty poorly in the political phase, again trying to get rid of these weak cards. And they have a plan this turn to focus on the action phase and really attempt to drive the reds out of the Don region. So they're playing low value cards in this PC phase. The reds, on the other hand, have their objective of trying to secure some of the non-CP oriented factions such as Belarus and Astrakhan as much as possible. So they invest reasonably strongly and then pick cards that shift Belarus, Astrakhan, and Turkestan, and they're pretty successful. In the end result, they gain control of Belarus. This is still under CP restrictions. They gain control of Turkestan without restriction. They shift Astrakhan into red influence. And what else happens? Yeah, accidentally, the whites gain control of Latvia and Khiva. Khiva will maybe serve as a bit of a check on red control of Turkestan. The whites also gain control of France as well, but again, still under CP restrictions. And Transcaucasia shifts towards white a little bit, Ukraine towards white. But overall, I think red was reasonably happy with that. They should be in a decent position once CP withdraws. Unfortunately, red didn't really pay too much attention, and Lenin was wounded as a result of one of these cards. They did get some bonus CPs. Yeah. Now in the action phase, white came out really strong. They began to move Kolchak and those Siberian armies to the west. They're trying to threaten Perm, and they're really activating these armies quite frequently throughout this action round. Now down in the south in the Don region, they go on the offensive, and now one of the political cards limited white replacement steps to 2. So white limited to 2 replacement steps this turn, but it doesn't stop their offensive. They go out attacking in both against the reds in Migalinska and Saritsyn. They do suffer some step losses. They are suffering these casualties, but and again, limited to 2 replacement steps. The reds are thinking, the whites won't attack too much. They've only got 2 replacement steps. This will save us a little bit. But it doesn't. And despite having kind of a bad hand, they do pretty well in combat, and they pretty quickly clear the reds out of both Migalinska and Saritsyn. It forces Trotsky to kind of retreat to the north, forces Stalin to retreat northeast, and the whites, by the end of this action phase, at the end of the sort of 6 rounds here, they've captured all of the Don region and forced the reds back to Voronezh in the northwest, and Stalin's retreated all the way back to Saratov in the east central region. And in fact, some of the Don cavalry have pushed into that red central region just east of Voronezh and are preparing for that attack on the VP city. Up in the northeast, the Siberian armies continue to push, and they begin to, actually they move eventually directly adjacent to Perm and threaten that city. Way up in the northwest, in the north region, Murmansk and Archangel, the US and British Corps, as I said earlier, they are trying to eliminate the red core in this region to give themselves some flexibility. And they succeed in killing off both of those red core. And having done so, they're like, okay, what do we do now? And they kind of just sit around for a little bit, not sure what to make of their success. It's a long way to Vologda, north of Moscow, and they're really unsure what to make of their success in that area. Now, because the reds have been so busy responding to white moves, every time the whites attack, the reds have to rush in, core, move their armies, get into a better defensive position. They're not able to take advantage of their insurrection army in the east sort of southeastern corner of the east region. And this is important because they are eliminated in that wrap-up roll. They rolled a 1 to be removed from the board, whilst the Siberian Cossack Corps still remains down there in that southeastern corner. It would have just taken one attack, I think, to eliminate them, but they weren't able to do so because they were rushing around doing other things. Now, in the second last turn, the Reds played a 4-op card for replacements. And then on their last turn, they played SRs to bring in some of these elite corps, just to reinforce Voronezh and Perm up in the northeast. There's not really much else the Reds can do. They are just being attacked all over the board, and are just trying to pull back and get themselves into better defensive positions. They have lost a lot of core, whilst the white casualties box is pretty empty, has 1 army, 1 core. The Reds have a lot of core. During that wrap-up, they do rebuild 2 armies back to full strength, 1 in Voronezh, 1 with Stalin in Saratov. This is where the big threat is coming. They're hoping that those defenders in Perm might retreat or might be able to hold off the Siberians. Things certainly looking good for the whites. The Central Powers withdrawal did not happen, so the whites and Reds are okay there. There was no attrition, still no white link up. White had about a 4-point differential in VPs, so they're jumping up the VP track. I mentioned those red replacements. Infighting was introduced by both players this turn. They both played their infighting event cards, so these cannons are getting ready for next turn. There was a further shift towards red on the Socialist Revolutionaries track. So despite being white, they are certainly leaning red. No movement with Japan. And that was about it for the end of that second turn.